Good day, everybody, and welcome to 20 Minutes on Ice, powered by the Garage Door Sports Network. I'm your host, Ryan, and as always, in the co-host position is Nick. We've got another fantastic preview show coming up for you, so let's get right to our opening face-off. Today on 20 Minutes, we will be previewing the Central Division, plus there's a few storylines in the division that we do want to look at. Colorado's made some changes in the offseason. Are they still an elite team? Jonathan Toews is returning to play this year after missing all of last season. What can we expect? And another player that's returning, Tyler Seguin, to the Dallas Stars. He only had about 3 games last year. So what kind of impact will he have on that team? Can he get the Stars back to the playoffs? I'm not just going to sit here, though, and discuss these things by myself. So joining
I would love
me,
to listen to that, though.
It's not so fun. Joining me, as you just heard, is a man who will be part of our final cuts this preseason, Nick McVicker. Nick, how you doing?
Why do I got to be part of the final cut? You think I would make the final cut is humbling, but I don't even think I would make it that far.
Sorry, someone's got to be cut. And
I'm just saying, I don't even think I would make it that far.
Just take the experience and come back next year stronger.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take the 1 week that I get. I'm not even final cut material. I think I'm like second cut. I might make the first cut. I might survive first cuts.
No, you would definitely survive first cut. We got the Central Division, and I guess this is your team, but I'm also along for the ride here as well. The Colorado Avalanche are featured in this division. Plus, there's several other teams that are definitely interesting to talk about. I'm looking forward to Chicago this year. I'm looking forward to Winnipeg. And then there's a couple tire fires, but overall, not as maybe not as strong as the Eastern Conference, but of the 2 divisions in the Western Conference, I would say this division is the strongest.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I will say the top end talent in the Pacific, where you have the Vegas, the Edmonton, those 2 teams, I think are better than the top 2 in the Central. If you're comparing side by side, I think Colorado is better than Edmonton, but I think Edmonton is better than everybody else in the Central Division. I think there's going to be more fighting for the playoff spots in the Pacific Division than the Central Division. Because I kind of think I know which 4 teams are going to be in the playoff spots come season end, and I don't even think it's close.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with. Well, when we get to our predictions,
yeah. I'm just saying I don't think it's close in my head, but
yeah. Well, we'll definitely see where it's going.
I also could very easily see the 4th place team in this division not making playoffs.
Yeah, again, because they're still going with the wild card system. So you may have, I think the Pacific's just too weak. I don't think they'll garner enough wins to,
But here's the thing: the Pacific Division has those 3 awful teams at the bottom.
Yeah, that's true. So
right, so they're going to beat up on those teams.
They might, we always say
I would assume those teams are going to beat up on the bottom 3, just because the bottom 3 are that much worse. Whereas this division has 1 or 2 teams that are that much worse.
You always get those top teams, though. Like, for example, the Maple Leafs last year had trouble with the Senators. And
that's because the Senators were a scrappy little team. And
yeah, they're not bad. They're not bad. So
we'll get to them next week.
Absolutely. Or yeah, we'll be back for more previews. But let's focus on the Central Division now that we're here.
Okay.
We'll start in Colorado, Nick.
Oh, that's so kind of you.
Well, we're both Colorado fans. I do like the team. I can you even say young anymore? Young in the sense of actual in real life, but coming of age in hockey life.
I mean, they only have 5 players over the age of 28.
Yeah, no, but now
not including goaltenders, because goalies are a different breed.
And defense is sort of there as well. But I mean, they've made some changes in the offseason. Notably, Grubauer decided to leave to go to Seattle for, you would have to assume, more money. Brandon Saad is out. Ryan Graves is out. Donskoy is out. Carl Soderberg is out, among other players. So just with the changes, is this Colorado team still an elite team? And to add on to that, are they still as an elite team as they were last year?
Absolutely.
Are they better?
No.
So they're on par, you're thinking?
They're on par, because I think offensively they're going to be fine. Get a full season out of Mikko Rantanen, I hope. That'll help. The defense core, who is very very young. They have Devin Toews, Cale Makar, Sam Girard, Bowen Byram, and Ryan Murphy are all 28 years of age or younger, which is incredible for a defense core. You don't see defense cores that young usually. The only guy who's older than 28 is Eric Johnson.
A lot of is expected of Bowen Byram here.
Oh,
And what
absolutely. But he's playing on the third line because he's the third line left defenseman behind Devin
that
Toews and Sam Girard.
and I think people are expecting him to move up just
I do
based
too.
on his
Eventually,
pedigree.
I actually think he'll end up on the top line playing with Makar. Maybe not this season, but in the next 2 years, he will be playing with Makar, in my
I
opinion.
think that's incredible to have such a young first pairing D and
Right?
just give them all that responsibility. But they are that good. So
They're that good. I'm really excited to see how this D core comes together. The offense, I'm not too worried about. Yeah, we lost Donskoy, we lost Sod, but in all honesty, Sod wasn't anyone that was coming back anyway. We knew that going into it. Donskoy was a big. Donskoy hurt a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but we filled pretty admirably, if you ask me, with Alex Newhook. He's gonna slot in on that third line, and I think he brings a good balance between Tyson Yost and JT Compher. The nice thing about that line is all three of those guys can play center. So you kind of have a lot of versatility there, and they can kind of help protect the young 20-year-old Newhook who will be playing in his first full season. I'm assuming he'll make the lineup, but he'll be playing in his first full season. I totally forgot that Colorado picked up Darren Helm, by the way.
yeah, I'm
I,
seeing that here on
I don't know
the
how that
depth
went
chart.
so under the radar.
That'll be interesting. But
My
I mean,
biggest, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
is he going to play the Donskoy role?
I
Like
think he's gonna
it
be
seems,
fourth line. Like he will be stationed nicely on the fourth line.
yeah, and maybe he can work his way up. Maybe he just
Yeah,
finds
he can move up,
some.
injuries, whatever, for sure. I agree with you there. My biggest
I
concern is the
see.
goaltending.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. And just, I mean, we talked about it last year where we thought Grubauer was perfect for their system,
Yep.
where they very much limited shots and chances. And you would have to assume that they're going to do that again.
Oh,
And we'll see
absolutely.
how,
That's not the concern.
yeah, we'll see how Darcy Kemper does in that situation because there are goalies that need the shots to perform, not unlike a forward who needs the ice time to perform.
My biggest
So
concern is that they got kind of backed into a corner, Colorado, and when Grubauer was taken in the, when Grubauer was signed with Seattle, it was so late that all the top goaltenders were already signed, so they had to resort to a trade, and I think they made the wrong trade, personally.
did you
Uh,
have someone else you were eyeing, or it's just you're
well, no,
not?
but like you look at guys in the same tax bracket or below, I guess is the best way to. I love using the word tax bracket for player salaries. Um, but he's making 4.5, right? So here's players who are making 4.5 or less, or goaltenders that are making 4.5 or less that I might have gone after on another team. Okay? And let me know what you think after, but here's some guys that I might have gone after. I would have gone after maybe one of the two New York Islanders goalies. I know Varlamov is making 5, so it's a bit of a bump up, but 0.5 million is not the worst thing. Or Sorokin is making 4.125, so you might have been able to go after one of them. You go after Mers Lincolns in Columbus or Korpisalo. Both of them are making less than Darcy Kemper. What about Alex Nedjelkovic, who was traded to Detroit, right? You could have tried to go after him before Detroit picked him up. Gorgiev, who looks to be on the outside looking in New York, another young guy to go with Francouz. It kind of depends on what you were looking for at that point, right? Antti Ranta is also a guy who was a free agent who I think is comparable to Darcy Kemper, but
I
$2.5
disagree.
million dollars cheaper.
I like the Kemper pickup. I mean, the Islanders goaltender, sure, but maybe the trade just wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like
But we gave
the
up a
pieces didn't fit.
first and potentially a third if they win the cup.
Yeah, because you're
I gotta stop
like
saying
you
we.
mentioned, yeah, like you mentioned, Grubauer left late or
Yeah.
signed late, and so you're kind of the other teams have the Avs kind of bent over the coals at that point, and you got to make a move, or else And they went with someone who has NHL experience, international experience as well.
Yep.
Kemper's been the starter for some world championship teams, but it'll be interesting to see how the season goes in Colorado. I still think they're an elite team. There's a question mark in net as to whether or not they are as good as last year. So I can't say they're as good as last year, but I still think they're an elite team. Let's switch over to the Blackhawks now. Jonathan Toews returning after missing last season with an illness. He had chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Don't ask me what that is, but it was obviously serious enough where he couldn't play for the season. I believe he was at the point where he couldn't even work out or
Yeah,
anything.
he was.
So,
It got that bad.
and so, I mean, he's obviously feels well enough to get going here this season, and he must be chomping at the bit to perform. And I still think he has a few seasons left in the tank here.
Yeah, I mean, are we going to get the 81 point season that we got in 2018, 2019? No. Is he going to be a 20 goal scorer? I don't know.
I think he could be. 2 seasons ago, when they were shut down in March for the pandemic,
Yeah, he had
obviously,
18.
he had 18, and that was in 70 games. So I think he would have gotten to 20. And so I think that's a reasonable expectation for John. I would say 2020 and 40 points is reasonable for
Okay.
Jonathan Toews. Plus, I mean, great leader and
Yeah.
playoff time. He's a huge big game performer.
Oh, absolutely. You can't underscore how valuable his leadership is for this team. 100. That's something that we can't forget. I'm just wondering what his point realistic standards are for this season, and I hope Chicago goes into it knowing, okay, this guy's coming off of an entire year and a half off, where he was so sick that he could not work out for a while, right? And are tempering expectations for him coming back, because if not, they're going to put themselves in a very, very dangerous situation where they're expecting too much out of him that he might not be able to physically produce that. I hope he can, because I love watching Jonathan Toews. He's a fantastic player, and he's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, Chicago is expecting, like we mentioned, not the 80-point season that we've seen in the past, but they're putting them on the top line because their other options at center are Kirby Dach and Tyler Johnson, who's coming over from the Tampa Bay Lightning. So
You had to think about that one for a second, didn't you?
yeah, I did. Yeah, I was like, in my mind, he's still a Pittsburgh Penguin, of course.
Dylan Strome is also a center. Ryan Carpenter also can play center. Adam Gaudette, don't forget they picked him up in a trade at the end of the season. He'll probably play center down on the fourth line. But Kirby Dach filled in really, really well on that top line last season playing with Patrick Kane. So we could also see Kirby end up playing on that line with Kane and Toews just because he has that chemistry with Kane already. Tyler Johnson's probably going to be the second line center, as you said, with a combination of DeBrincat, probably Kubalik, or Strome. And whichever one of those guys isn't on the second line will be on the third line playing with Jujhar Khaira and most likely Ryan Carpenter. Or maybe Alex Nylander. Because we can't forget about him.
Another Nylander. But
the other Nylander.
I don't see Tyler Johnson taking a second line role at all. I definitely think
so. Who's going to be second?
I think they're throwing Toews up front on first line, and they will back him up with Kirby Dach on second line.
I know, but then so you're putting Tyler Johnson all the way on the third line, and not on the wing on the second line?
Nope, he's a bottom six player to me. So,
okay.
But just for reference, the
$5 million bottom six player, expensive bottom six.
His contract is big, and that's why Tampa Bay moved him out.
Expensive bottom six player.
Yeah, that's how it goes. I mean, Chicago got something for taking on that contract. So
I do. But, can I just add quickly? I love the contract for Jujhar Khaira.
I like the player too, but go ahead. What's the contract?
2 years, 975,000 for 2 years for him, which is great. I love it. And he's not going to put up many points, but man, he's a third or fourth line player that you want on your team.
There's a potential for some upside there. So yeah, it's a fair deal, and we'll see how that plays out because I did like him.
He is 27. With him, remember that.
Yeah. So in a couple years, you got him till he's 30 there. So, like I mentioned, the Hockey News has Jonathan Toews projected for 50 points this year in Chicago. So we'll see how that goes. The other returning player, the big returning player in this division, Tyler Seguin, he only got 3 games at the end of last season because he missed most of it, recovering from hip surgery, an injury that he suffered in the Stanley Cup final run in the bubble. So he's essentially spent, 10 months recovering. When he did come back for those 3 games, he did have 2 goals. So can he come back and be Dallas's top scorer? And is he going to help Dallas get back into the playoffs?
I don't like the answer to either of those questions. Uh, I don't think he will be their top scorer. I think either Joe Pavelski or Jamie Benn or Radulov might beat him in points. I also don't think Dallas makes the playoffs, so no to both, I guess.
So,
But I think he can have
back,
a successful season.
Can he come back at the level that he was at?
Yes. Yes,
So
I do believe he can come back to at the level that he was at. Maybe a half step back, if anything, because we have to be realistic. We don't know how bad this hip injury really was. I know he missed all of last season. He had the hip surgery. Now we have to see how he's going to recover from that. I do think he will come back and be almost as good, if not as good, as the Tyler Seguin we saw the last time we saw him play, which I guess was the playoffs.
Not good enough to grab the team on his back and put them in the playoffs.
No, I just don't think the team around him is good enough to make the playoffs.
I think they'll be battling. I can see them in that wild card battle for
I
the
I just don't think they're good enough to get there, though. Right? Like I think they're like the next tier. So not in the playoffs, but just out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I can see that, and we'll get into that, of course, when we do our predictions here for the Central Division. But lots of good storylines in this division, especially the Toews and Seguin storylines, and see how they will perform this year. We'll be keeping an eye on them. Who knows? Maybe we did the Barks and Hubie watch last season. Maybe we got to find maybe some replacements this year. Might be these returning players, Toews and.
I thought we were gonna do the Wright and Shane Wright and who was the other guy that we were talking
Connor
about?
Bedard.
Connor Bedard watch.
Yeah, we might have to do that too. Lots of good storylines. Like really, it's a really meaty season. It feels like in the hockey world.
Or
so.
you know what, Rye? We should do goaltenders. 2 goalies. We should have them go head to head.
We'll have to see what lots of room for suggestions there. If anybody
Grubauer versus Kemper.
Yeah, that's a good one actually. Find us on Twitter if you got a suggestion for who we're watching this year. All right, Nick, we're about to get into the Central Division here and the teams more specifically than the storylines. We will be doing who's going to exceed expectations, who's going to meet expectations, who's going to disappoint, and then we'll wrap it up with our standings predictions. So here we go. Let's get into it. Nick, we'll start off with the team that you think from the Central Division that will exceed expectations.
Ooh, exceed expectations. Okay. So I think we talked about this when all of the trades were happening and all the signings were happening and things were going this team's way. And I don't know how you don't pick from this division specifically, how you don't pick Chicago. They did the most in the offseason, and they look like they are ready to make that next step and win games again. And it's something that we haven't been able to say for a couple years now, realistically, just because they were going through that quote-unquote rebuild that doesn't look like a rebuild now because they didn't really build anything. All of a sudden, all their young talent just got good enough. And then they picked up Jones and Fleury.
I guess you could say DeBrincat and Doc were kind of products of where they ended up. But I would have to totally agree with you. My team is also going to be Chicago. That will exceed expectations. I don't know if people are expecting them to make the playoffs, and I think they will be comfortably in the playoffs. I'm not saying they're taking the division, but I think they'll be comfortably in the playoffs. You mentioned the pieces of Seth Jones on D, Fleury and net. And
McCabe, you can't forget McCabe and as well.
Yep, absolutely. And you could kind of consider Toews as a piece they're adding because he wasn't part of the equation last year.
Tyler Johnson could also be a good piece added here. A depth player who has the ability to put the puck in the net when needed to, can play on the power play. Like that's another good piece that we aren't talking about. Like most people are forgetting that.
Yeah, but I'm not so excited about Tyler. Like he's
I'm
not.
not
He's
saying
not.
he's the big piece, obviously, right? But you can't
I
not
wouldn't.
talk
He's
about him.
not even showing up on my radar. And let's not forget, we're almost ignoring Patrick Kane here. But he grabs the team, puts them on his back. He stirs the drink, if you will,
Absolutely.
there in Chicago, and he's going to be dynamite. Like this guy is still a
This guy's
top.
getting his backup back with Jonathan
Yeah.
Toews.
So I mean, lots and lots of reason to be excited in Chicago as the team that will exceed expectations. Because for me, I don't think the expectations are
High enough.
high enough for this team. So I do expect them to make the playoffs comfortably.
Yep.
Um, let's look at teams that will meet expectations. Um, so I went in a little bit different direction here, but there are no expectations. Actually, there's expectations in Arizona to tank and draft Shane Wright, and I think Arizona will meet those expectations. If there's they could finish 32nd, maybe 31st in the league, they will not make the playoffs. They will not win this division. They will not compete in this division. So they will meet expectations. They just sold off everybody they possibly could. There's not much left there. Phil the Thrill is still there. Clayton Keller is still there in Arizona. They barely have a rink to play at. So, I mean, Arizona is just, as usual, a gong show, and they will meet the expectations of a gong show.
Yeah. I can't even argue that. And when you said that they may or may not finish 31st, right? I shook my head because there's no chance that they're finishing 31st in my mind. They are by far the worst team in the league. And we talked about Anaheim earlier this week. Anaheim's bad. Arizona's that much worse. It's not even close.
There's going to be a
I
turtle
feel
race there.
bad for the goalies.
You got Buffalo, who always manages to disappoint. Detroit could be in that conversation. Anaheim's going to be terrible,
But at
and
least Detroit's
Arizona's
headed in the
there.
right direction. The other
They're
three teams are
trying.
not.
They're trying. So, but Arizona could run away with this, and it may pay off if they get Shane Wright and he turns into a generational player.
Yes. Here's how you know that they're going to run away with it, Ryan. Are you ready for this?
You're going to talk about their goaltending?
Carter Hutton
Yeah,
and Joseph Coronar.
I have never heard of that guy.
Well, he's
I know
23.
Carter
He's
Hutton.
young. He's young,
Okay.
but he's never even really played in the minors. Now he's going to be your backup.
No, yeah, they're going. They're going.
They
For
did a
Shane
great
Wright.
job getting Connor Timmins in that Darcy Kemper deal because Connor Timmins is going to be a good NHL defenseman. Maybe not a number one NHL defenseman, but he'll probably slot in as like a 2-3 sort of thing. And I think when he's fully ready to go, they got Gostisbehere, who, I mean, he could find the Gostisbehere that he was 3 years ago. Is that realistic? Probably not. But is he still a serviceable NHL defenseman? Absolutely. No problem with that. They have Chikrin.
And they also brought in Strawman too from the Panthers
Yeah,
on a big contract. I mean, they brought in a lot of big contracts because they could,
because they had
and
to.
they got they got pieces for that as well. But for me, it just feels like they filled some spots on the roster because they had to. It wasn't like these players will work well in Arizona. It's
No.
we need these players to field a team here. So
I just feel
bring them
bad.
on
I
in.
feel bad for the guys who are stuck there, like Clayton Keller, Phil Kessel. I feel bad for Phil Kessel. I know he doesn't care. I know he doesn't
Yeah,
care
I
at
think
all.
he's just
But I
he's
feel
happy to play
bad
on.
for Phil Kessel because he is too talented to be on a team like this.
And they may move him. Who knows for pieces
His $6.8
later on.
million contract is probably telling me he won't get moved.
If someone wants him for a playoff run,
It's
who knows?
1 year, so it's
Who
done after
knows?
this year. Well, yeah, but I just don't see it happening. Anyways, yeah, it's.
Who's going to meet expectations for you, Nick?
I went in the same sort of direction you did, Rye. And actually, no, I went the opposite direction for this one. Let me correct that statement. Colorado is going to meet my expectations for this division, and it's very simple because they are the best team in this division. So the expectation is that they're going to win this division, and I think they win this division comfortably.
I agree.
So it's I'm not really if not really breaking the mold here. It's very, very simple. They're the best team in the
Fine.
division. The expectation is that they're the best team in the division, and they're probably going to win the division. So
I find in the Western Conference, it's like first place is almost locked up.
in both
Colorado,
division. Yeah,
yeah, Colorado in the Central, Vegas in the Pacific, and I
second
guess we
place
just
is
hope.
pretty much locked up in both as well, and I think we'll get to that later. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think the top two in both divisions are pretty much locked down. Could
Well,
those ones move? Yes, but I think they're locked.
it definitely could move. That's why we play 82 games, so we'll see what happens.
As
But we
opposed
will
to the shortened season last year.
72
But
or yeah, 56 or whatever it is. All right, Nick. Um, who will disappoint in the Central Division?
now this is where I got confused because I thought I had this team meeting expectations, but technically they have higher expectations than I think that they're going to meet, and it's Nashville. I don't think Nashville is headed in the direction that they need to be headed in right now, and that's a huge problem. UC Saros is I want to just say he's a good goaltender. I haven't seen anything to tell me that he's going to be like the elite that was Pekka Rinne. He's shown flashes of it, I guess. I just don't think he's good enough. And I'm sorry, David Riddick is also not good enough to be that elite goaltender that this team needs. They have a very strong defense core because it's Nashville and that's all they do is produce defensemen, right? But it's
Yep.
not as strong as it has been in the past.
No, yeah,
It's
especially with
still
Ellis.
strong. Don't get me wrong. It is still strong, but it's not as strong as it has been in the past. And they suck up front.
Yeah, I mean Johansson's a disappointment. What they still have Duchesne there.
Yeah.
Um,
Duchesne and Johansson are both on $8 million contracts. Philip Forsberg is the lone bright spot, in my opinion. Maybe Eli Tolvanen you can throw in there as a bright spot.
they're
But
expecting
Granlund is not good enough. Colton Sissons is
no.
not good enough. Luke Cunnin is not good enough to be your number one right winger.
It's going to be rough in Nashville. I feel like they're a team that's on a stationary bike and they're pedaling backwards. That's where what they feel like to me. They're just not going anywhere and don't have an idea of how to go anywhere at the moment. So they need a little more direction there in Nashville. Um, as far as me disappointing, I'm going to go with Dallas here, and I think there are some reasonable expectations where Tyler Seguin comes in, improves this team. People are still hanging their hat on that Stanley Cup final performance from 2 seasons ago. So I don't think they're going to get there, and I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. They'll compete for a playoff spot, but you have Ben who's aging, you have Pavelski who's aging. At some point, the wheels start to fall off. I'm not saying they're just going to fall off right away, but the process is going to start at some point, and I think it's coming up here. So I would say Dallas is going to disappoint as far as expectations go in the Central Division.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I just said it earlier when we were talking about Sega, and I don't think this team is good enough to make the playoffs personally. Um, and if we're talking about a team that everyone else thinks is going to make the playoffs, then yeah, that is a disappointment that they're not making the playoffs. So I agree with you, Rye, 100%.
All right. So we've gone over our teams that exceed, meet, and will disappoint based on expectations. We're going to take a quick break here, quick commercial break. When we come back, we will be getting in to our division predictions. That's what everybody wants to hear. So we'll be getting into our division predictions for the Central Division when we come back right after this.
Are you looking for a weekly sports podcast filled with insight and analysis you can't get anywhere else? How about a show with three friends who truly love what they talk about? If so, Garage Door Sports is the podcast for you. Hosted by Nick McVicker, Kyle Vardy, and Irfan Manji, they bring you all the latest news, notes, and of course analysis on the sporting world. Are you ready for it? Let's go.
Welcome back. 20 minutes on ice. Ryan Hazlitt, Nick McVicker here. We're previewing the NHL's Central Division. Nick, it's time to go over our predictions, put them out there for people to hear, something that's tangible that we can come back and reference at the end of the season. So
Yes, it is.
I think we both have the same last place team.
Well,
I'll
let's
let
get right
you.
into it. Let's get the boards
Yeah.
up. Ready, Rye? Let's get the boards
Oh, we got
ready.
the boards. Yes.
The boards.
Ooh, look at those things. I love this. Here we go.
This is
Nick, I'll let
Ryan's
you go.
favorite part of any show is the boards.
Well, especially because you're going to throw up some logos, and I love logos. So,
Ryan, are we
um,
just going to say that we know the bottom two for each?
we definitely know number 8, and we probably know number
No, no,
7
no.
based
We
on what
we
we
know
said.
number 8 and number 7 because we've already talked about how bad these two teams are. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right,
So
can I just put them both up instead of putting one up? I'm putting them both up.
throw it up there, Nick. Number 8 for both of us is the Arizona Coyotes. As we said, this
They're
is
number
a
32.
it's a it's a garbage pile waiting for a flame. This is just a disaster, and let's see how it unfolds. Nashville, again, a team that is not going to perform and doesn't seem to have a plan to get it done.
They're bad.
Well put, Nick. Well put.
Thank you. I try.
All right, let's get to some teams that may actually compete for the playoffs here. Sixth place. I don't know if you have your sixth place team thinking about the playoffs or touching a playoff spot. I
No, I
do
don't have
personally.
either 5 or 6 touching a playoff spot or thinking about a playoff spot personally.
Interesting.
But
All right, so who's your sixth place team here in the
we're
Central
going my
Division?
6 too. I have Dallas. I just don't
Okay.
think that there's enough there to compete with the next two teams in the division. Now, again, I don't think the next team in my book is pushing for a playoff spot. I'm not even sure 4 is technically pushing for a playoff spot, but they're fourth because I need to put somebody in fourth in the division. But yeah, I just have Dallas. I don't see enough from them right now.
And I went with a team that I underestimated last year, and I feel like this could come back and bite me. But when you look at the teams on paper, the Minnesota Wild for me are sixth place. And this may come back and kick me right in the face at the end of the year. But again, when you look at these teams on paper, I just don't see that they have enough. But maybe they're like the New York Islanders. They're just a great system team. And they have Kaprizov back this year. That went fine. So
That went
I don't know.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Hold on. Can we talk about that contract though?
That's huge.
I saw a
What
big
nine
contract for 1 year
average 9 per year,
for
9 mil per
5
year
years. It's not like
for
it's like 1
five.
or 2 years, right? Like it's 5 years.
Yeah, Kaprizov must. Oh, Minnesota must think he's going to be a top player as well. He's in his mid 20s. Like
He's
I feel
24.
like, yeah, I feel like what we saw
He's
last
younger
year.
than me. This is very upsetting.
It happens, Nick. Just wait. You get people my age and they start retiring. Like
Okay,
Jason
you want to know the
Spence's
sad?
boys.
You want to know the really sad one that really scares me on Minnesota? The guy that's younger than me is Kevin Fiala because I feel like he's been in the league for 12 years.
Yeah.
He's 25. Like no.
All right, Nick. Who do you have coming in fifth place? You said they're not going to touch a playoff spot.
Well, I have the Minnesota Wild.
There you go.
I didn't really have them going much higher than you. I do think 5 and 6 could be flipped. I just have Minnesota slightly ahead because I think they have more potential for secondary scoring as opposed to Dallas. And I also think that the defense core in Minnesota is slightly better than Dallas's defense core. Dallas has the better number 1 defenseman in Miro Heiskanen. But as a core, I think Minnesota has the better core. So I'm leaning towards them. We also don't really know who's playing in net for Dallas yet. That's something
Yeah,
that's
they
not
got
really
Holtby
talked
and
about. Like
Hudobin, right? Yeah.
it's a whole mess. Like they have who else do they have?
Well,
They got
Bishop's around, but
Kudobin,
Bishop's not.
Holtby, Bishop is there. They're
Bishop's
also
not
talking
playing.
about Odinger again because he played well last year in spurts. I have no idea who's playing in net yet, and until they figure that out, like it's hard to really. I mean, it's hard to figure out Dallas.
Yeah, it will be hard to figure out Dallas. That's why I
Bullshit.
have them fifth place. So you and I have pretty much just swapped Minnesota and Dallas here. And we mentioned it. They could finish 5-6 in either way. But yeah, I don't like I'm not confident with what Dallas has. And I'm not confident that they're suddenly gonna become that team again that made the Stanley Cup final.
I'm just less confident than you, I guess.
A little bit, yeah. All
Not
right,
much,
Nick.
but I'm less confident than you.
Let's start talking about maybe some teams here because now it's fourth place.
Yeah.
Maybe some teams here that will be thinking playoff spot. You said no. You said only 3 from the Central are probably making it.
Yes.
I think 4 from the Central and 4 from the Pacific in the West will make it. But who's your fourth place team here in the Central?
I got the Blues, and I think they have good pieces. This is a team that's just 2 years, 3 years removed from the Stanley Cup. They have Jordan Binnington, who is a good to bottom half of great goalie, I guess. I wouldn't. He's definitely not elite, but he's a very solid goaltender. The defense core is good. The forward core is good. But that's kind of the problem. Like, if you want to push for a playoff, you need to be better than just good. I mean, it is the West, so they might not have to be. But I just don't. I don't know if they get. I don't know if they get one of the wild card spots right now.
I think they do. I got St. Louis in fourth as well. And I do like their defense. Um, Parayko, Krug, Falk. I like that grouping. Not a Bennington fan. I just have this
I know you're
feeling he's
not,
on.
but
I have a feeling he's on a downswing here. I think he's peaked already, and he's got now a big contract. So for the Blues' sake, they hope he's not. But they also have this Tarasenko thing
I love how
kind
you
of.
say he peaked. He had a 2.6 goals against average and a 910 save percentage last year.
I'm talking about when he peaked and showed up and brought them to the Stanley Cup.
I know,
That's a
but I'm
peak.
just saying, like it's not like he's an awful goaltender after the peak. Like he's still
No,
a very above average goaltender.
yeah, he's good. He's good. I
As
just
I
don't
said, they're
think.
good. They're just good at everything, but not
Yeah, he's
great
not.
and not good enough, I think.
The whole team, including Bennington, is not what they were,
Yeah.
and that's why I have them fourth in this division. I think they will make the playoffs, and this Tarasenko thing is kind of just hanging over the team, and he wants out, and we'll see if they are able to move him. But you got one of these big pieces, and as much as he may be like saying, I'm going to be committed to the team until they move me, you just can't be sure that someone is actually giving 100%. So we'll see.
Good addition
We'll
though
see where
of
that
Brandon
goes.
Saad. I will say that's a good pickup for them because he doesn't need to be a top line player, so he can slide nicely in that second line and try to give them some secondary scoring, which let's be honest, they've missed dearly.
Yeah, vet presence that can add something, a new element to that team
Yep.
in a depth role. So yeah, absolutely, I do like that addition as well. All right, Nick, we both have the same three teams left, so I think we might be agreeing on 1, 2, and 3 here. But who do you
I
have third?
think we do too, but you go first for three, right? You've given me the privilege of going first for all the first five. You go first on three.
All right, this is where I'm talking about the Chicago Blackhawks, and I've mentioned how they've had the essentially three additions. Taves is coming back, Fleury and net, Seth Jones on D. They still have Patrick Kane, like I mentioned. This team is now ready to move, and they lost steam last year, but they were having an excellent first two-thirds of the season. I think they get the job done this year. They make the playoffs. I'm not saying they win around, but they have Marc-Andre Fleury, so you never know what could happen in the playoffs. But yeah, this team is ready to go, is ready to compete again, which is great because I love the Hawks. And the only thing that could really just derail the season are all the allegations out there about that 2010 season and the hidden abuse that went on. It's just a lot of outside noise that may permeate the team or may not. We'll see what happens. But I like the Hawks for third this year.
Yeah, and I think they're good enough to get past that right now, just because the division that they're in is, as we said, the West is not very good.
The West used to be dynamite, but it's not.
It's not the West that we grew up watching there,
No,
right?
no.
It is ugly West right now. It ain't no wild West. It is ugly. Um, but yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Chicago's in a good spot, and I have them at three as well. So that pretty much tells you who my number two and one are. But they're just in a good spot, and I think as long as Tays can come back and play solid hockey, he doesn't have to be great, he doesn't have to be fantastic, but he needs to play solid hockey, and they should be fine.
All right. So I think it's obvious now. We have number two the same, and it's the Winnipeg Jets for me.
Yeah, and me too.
And yeah, there you go. I like what they've done with their defense core, building it back up. It's taken a few years,
But it wasn't
but
even that bad last year.
it wasn't. No, they've always performed well, but they exceeded expectations.
Absolutely.
Their defense last year.
Absolutely.
Plus, you have Connor Hellebuck, who may be the best goalie in the league right now. And you can do anything when you
He's
have,
either 1A or 1B at this
yeah,
point.
you can do anything when you have Hellebuck in net. Plus, their forward group is really strong. I'm not sold on Dubois bouncing back. I don't know if he's going to be the player that they want him to be, but the team is still strong. I love Scheifele. I'm a big Scheifele fan. I think this team is good enough to separate themselves from Chicago. So there's definitely a gap there. And a battle with Colorado will be very interesting. But looks like we both have Colorado coming out on top there. But why do you like Winnipeg for second place?
The defense and Hellebuck. It's as simple as that. They're going to just frustrate the rest of these teams in this division because they don't have any secondary scoring. And if you don't have any secondary scoring, you're really going to struggle against Winnipeg. So the only team with secondary scoring is the only team that's probably going to finish ahead of them, and that's Colorado. um, but the thing is that I say that the other teams don't have secondary scoring. The biggest concern for Winnipeg right now is, do they have any depth scoring? That top line is fantastic of Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Blake Wheeler. And then that second line of Kopp, Ehlers, and Dubois, potentially, depending on which depth chart you're looking at. I'm looking at cap friendly, as I said in the Pacific preview.
You like, and Stasny that slots in there too.
Stasny can slot in there too,
Yeah.
yeah. Outside of Ehlers, you're not looking at a real big goal scoring threat on those lines. Like Kopp can put a couple in, but I still wouldn't call him a goal scoring threat. And then you've got nothing after that.
They're looking for Dubois to be a impact player again.
Absolutely.
I don't know if he has it. I don't know if it.
But
if
as I
it's
said, that's literally the only big concern, right? Is that the depth scoring for Winnipeg, and it's been the same thing for 3 years.
I feel like Dubois can go into this season. He should feel comfortable because he's got, you know, the goaltending there to cushion any mistakes. You have a good defensive core to cushion any mistakes,
Yep.
and you have a great top scoring line, and a solid bottom six. So you're just in this spot where there's really no pressure except for performing. But I mean, there you shouldn't feel the pressure because you're on a great team, and just go out there and do your thing. We'll see where.
And let's not forget the background stuff is that his dad is technically a coach in the Winnipeg organization. I don't know if he's with the top team or if he's with Manitoba, but he's in the organization. So that has to be some little bit of comfort, right? Like you're not kind of on your own anymore down in Columbus where you're an entire country technically away. You're actually right there. Your family's right there. It has to be a bit of a comfort for him. So hopefully he can slot in there and be that second line player that they want because he's obviously not going to outseed Mark Scheifele. We know that. We get that. But if he can be like a 1B,
that's what they want him for.
It's a great role. That's a great thing for Winnipeg. And you find your secondary line that can put the puck in the net.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Nick, that leads us to number one. We're both agreeing here that it's the Colorado Avalanche. I think they, it could be a battle with Winnipeg, but in the end, they pull away. I think in the end, they pull away. You see those final 20 games, and Colorado is going to show why they are still an elite
because
team.
They're going to pull a Tampa and sleepwalk through the first 20.
Maybe we'll see. Like, who knows? Maybe they take a page out of Tampa's book. Tampa has it figured out. Just make the playoffs, and then when the playoffs come, turn on the
only difference is Tampa has Vasilevsky, and Colorado definitely does not have Vasilevsky.
That's true. The goaltending is the question, but I mean, the biggest positive in Colorado, I think, is how driven Nathan McKinnon will be this year. I mean, he thought they had it last year. I heard him again interviewed on the 32 Thoughts podcast, and just how disappointed he was in himself, not the team, in himself in the series against Vegas. And he's coming for blood this year, and he's coming for the Stanley Cup. So I'm really looking forward to see how he performs this year.
Yeah, I agree. You can also throw Rantanen in there. This is a guy who went through a lot last year. All the injuries that he went through. It's not fun to deal with injuries. We know that, right? Like, so he is now more motivated than ever as well. You're also looking at a guy in Kemper who I think this goes without saying. Remember when he was touted as the next like great thing for a little bit there after he had that really good season? And he's kind of just not performed up to that for a little bit, and everyone's like, "Oh well," even me. Like I just said it earlier in the show. I'm not sure I'm sold on him. Well,
He,
now he can prove it.
yeah, he was in Arizona. He probably feels he flew under the radar. And here's your chance on a cup contending team to perform and open everyone's eyes. Kind of like what Grubauer did. Grubauer had big expectations. He had big expectations in Washington. Comes over to Colorado and shows people what he can do. And you want the same from Kemper here.
And you know what's crazy is that we talk about the top line, we talk about the second line on Colorado. We even talked about the third line. You want to know what we didn't talk about? Is the prospect depth and potential that we could see fill into this team this year in the forward group. We're talking Newhook, O'Connor, even Shane Bowers might make the jump. We don't know who's going to be at that bottom part. Jean-Luc Foudy could also be there too. I mean, he's only 19, so I don't think he'll be the one to make that big jump, but they have that potential where guys could be surprising. And I'm really excited to see who kind of fills out the top 12 because teams will not be ready for those youngsters. Because Colorado's been able to just hide them for a couple years.
It'll be really lots of, even though we say Colorado will easily take this division, lots of great storylines to still keep an eye on Colorado.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a good season in Colorado. Yeah. Those top three teams, I'm really looking forward to them performing this year. Everyone else under that, it's like, oh, yeah, let's see what happens. And I mean, if St. Louis underperforms and Minnesota's not doing too well, that'll be a low hype winter classic this year.
Yeah, listen, right. When I say that I'm not sure if St. Louis will make the playoffs, I almost have more faith in Los Angeles at this point.
What about Seattle ahead of St. Louis?
Well, I already had Seattle making the playoffs in my head because they're 4 in the Pacific. So 4 in the Pacific was making it.
How about Calgary or St. Louis? Who do you like there? That was a look from Nick on that one. He doesn't want to make this decision. Like we mentioned,
if Calgary forwards show up, I would rather Calgary because I think they're more complete of a team. But that means the forwards have to actually show up.
And I'm taking St. Louis over Calgary, so I don't have Calgary.
Well, I have St. Louis over Calgary too. I have Calgary finishing 6th in the Pacific. They're not even fighting for a playoff spot in my head.
It'll be interesting. Needless to say, it'll be very interesting. As we know, nothing's set in stone. There's lots of potential to watch here. There's lots of expected failures to watch here and see if they materialize. And then, keep watching on Colorado because there's lots of storylines there as well. So, Nick, is it just easy to say Colorado comes out of this division
yes.
after the playoffs?
Yes.
Just that easy? I mean, I think Winnipeg puts up enough of a fight for Colorado. Like, I can see a Winnipeg-Colorado series going 7 games.
I could, and that would be because Hellebuck's making 60 saves a game, and they're winning 1-0 games. They don't have scoring right. That's the problem. That's literally the only problem with Winnipeg, and I said that, and I'm going to continue to say that, is that when you get to the playoffs, you need secondary scoring or tertiary scoring even in some games. They don't have it. And until I can see some secondary scoring, Colorado takes a series in 6 at most. I say 5.
Wow, you're already predicting games, and we still have to go through the season.
Right?
So.
Well, if they put a 7-game series on right now, it's Colorado in 5. I haven't even seen Kemper play.
I think Winnipeg puts up a big fight here. I think they have a lot of drive.
Well,
they believe.
No.
Okay. If you hear interviews after last season, They believe they're right there. They're ready to be a cup team. They're ready,
Yeah,
they believe, to compete with Colorado. So
because they
there's
have
a lot of
Hellebuck.
drive in Winnipeg. Exactly. And that gives them a chance anytime that he's
I
on the
agreed
ice.
with that. I didn't deny that factor. That didn't change in my answer. But the only reason that this series would go 7 is because Hellebuck stands on his head, makes 60 saves, and they win a 1-0 or a 2-1 game. They're not going to outscore Colorado.
Well, we'll have to see where this goes. I mean, it'll be very interesting. This could be one of those divisions, who knows, where someone pops up. All of a sudden, Minnesota decides they know how to play and they're oddly winning the division. And,
No.
Colorado runs it. Who knows? There's so many storylines
No.
to I know it's
The
not
worst case scenario is Colorado has to play Minnesota in the first round. That is the worst case scenario. I don't want to see that.
anybody who has to play Minnesota because, like we've mentioned, they're a scary, good system team. And again, you look at their team, you're like, it's
No, but
okay.
Colorado always sucks against Minnesota, and I hate it. It frustrates me because they shouldn't.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens here
I'm tired
in
of it.
this Central Division. There is the horn that brings an end to this 20 minutes on ice. Be sure to subscribe to the show. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. That really helps us out. During the season, we're going to aim to be on every Sunday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, live right here on Twitch. So you can catch us then. You can follow me on Twitter at Ryan_H16. Follow Nick on Twitter at Nick McVicker, and follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at 20 minutes on ice. Also be sure to head on over to garagedoorsports.com. Find us under the shows tab. We will be continuing this coming weekend with more of our division season preview shows. We still have the Eastern Conference to do. We got the Metro Division and we got the Atlantic Division. So that's coming up this weekend. Until then, thanks for listening. Goodbye, everybody.